So first, I'm going to tell you why in 2023 I enjoyed watching Florida Grid League far more than I could have anticipated. And then why Florida Grid League disappearing in 2024 is actually a good thing. Being in the CrossFit world, I had heard about Grid League, but I had heard about it in a similar way that I had heard about CrossFit when I was just in the fitness world before doing it for myself. And when I started doing CrossFit, I realized that pretty much everything I had heard about it wasn't actually true. So I thought I should do the same thing with Grid League, have a look at it for myself. And so in 2023, I decided I was going to follow an entire season of Grid League. And that's exactly what I did. In 2023, I followed the entire season of the Florida Grid League, and my plan was then to make a video like this, talking about my experience. But before I could do that, I actually received an email directly from Grid League, giving me some information about future changes that were coming. Unfortunately, before I had an opportunity to speak about it, I got pretty ill and I couldn't record videos anymore. The email and the illness are unrelated. But now I'm back, I'm almost recovered, and I'm ready to talk about the Grid League. So let's talk about what it was like following the 2023 season for the first time, and then we can talk about the future of Grid. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of these elements in the comments below. But first, I guess it's important to say that Grid League is not CrossFit. It's not a methodology. It's simply a sport. So when you are watching Grid League, it is not that they are suggesting that these high-skilled movements should then be attempted by your average gym goer. Just like me watching the Olympics doesn't mean I'm going to get a broomstick and try and pole vault over my garden fence. No, for the majority of us, it's just a spectator sport. And of course, you can watch it on the live stream, and that's exactly what I did in 2023. Generally, there was one event happening a month, and it's just happening on one day in a relatively short window of time. And I actually found that a lot more convenient than when I need to buy out multiple days in a row to follow some CrossFit events. Now, probably the best way to describe Grid is fun. It's just a fun sport to watch, and there are a number of elements that I imagine would attract a lot of viewers. For example, very high-skilled gymnastics, but also men and women going head-to-head.
Doing the same. Paula Leyes out on the grid going for 8 ring muscle-ups. She is a gymnastics master, and as you can see, her and Cody Schaefer going rep for rep with these butterfly ring muscle-ups, a very, very difficult version of a ring muscle-up.
And it's tense. There are some incredibly close finishes in these races.
And here they go. This is a huge complex. It is a chest-to-bar, a toe-to-bar chest-to-bar, and a toe-to-bar chest-to-bar bar muscle-up 3 times through. Both gentlemen extending up on their muscle-ups. They are neck and neck. This will come down to a sprint to the finish line. Who is going to hit the ground first and trip? And this is a photo finish, folks.
And then there's an element of strategy. A smart decision can actually win you a race.
Yeah, and it looks like Hansen is not having any issues. She had an elbow injury earlier in the season, so she wasn't able to do too many upper body workouts. Now, so what she did there, if you saw on your camera, she set herself up on the other side of the barbell. As soon as her repetitions were done, all she had to do was back up.
So there's a lot of, I guess we could say, cool things that we can watch within Grid League. But that isn't what impressed me the most during the season. So obviously, in the world of sport, Grid is still very, very new. But they are aware of that, and they are aware of what they're doing well, but also very quick to recognize areas in which they need to improve. In fact, as soon as the season ended, they'd sent out an email talking about what had gone well, but definitely the areas they saw need for improvement. And actually, a lot of these points were also addressed in an Instagram post that was put up by the Florida Grid League Commissioner, Matha Weiser. Now, of course, if you want to follow a sport, it's really important that you understand what's going on. And a key team that made this possible for Grid League was the commentary team, Cassie Martinez, Alan Duarte, and Joe Roberto. In fact, Coming in as a new fan, I thought it would be easy to get lost, but things were always explained. For example, when a race had finished, but then they decided to replay part of the race.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to our first match of the day, the Northern Conference Championship. You were just witnessing the back half of the Echo, which is back-to-back races, same exact race separated by 45 seconds of transition. But just hearing from the commissioner, they are going to be rerunning elements 3 and 4 of that Echo. So that is the med ball muscle-ups and the 15 clusters at 205 pounds. Reason being, there was a miscount in the first half of the Echoes on the Aces side for those med ball muscle-ups.
Yep, and in the spirit of fairness, it's only fair that the Sharks get their chance to make it up.
Absolutely.
Or, as I said, Grid League, it's a new sport, and that means something can happen that means they need to make some changes to the rulebook. And maybe these changes are made between events, so we don't hear about them, but once again, it's clearly explained.
We are back.
Back and into the action after a difficult review, I would say, because it is a small piece of the puzzle that occurred on that race. However, it was determined after reviewing video that head coach Chris Garand did make contact with Sidney Wilson. So after last grid weekend in Orlando, there is a new rule that came out that a player cannot be touched or guided by a coach at any moment.
Right.
So should that happen, should there be contact with a player and a coach, it will result in a match loss. There is no rerun.
Race loss.
Race loss, excuse me.
Correct.
Race loss.
Right.
There is no rerun. Race is going to go to the Aces.
Yep.
And we're going to move forward, and we're going to get into our next race.
And maybe a final thought on this, as somebody who watches a lot of events on live streams, very often you'll find the chat is full of people asking, what's the workout? What are the movement standards? How many do they need to do? And with Grid League, there's a number of different races. There are also things like bonus flags that can be thrown on the field. But yet every time it is clearly explained what is happening, what we're about to see.
Lead is now a 2-point lead, and the sprint relay is winner take all, as the Aces have thrown the bonus flag, making this race worth 4 points. This race is a sprint relay. Joe, what's today's sprint relay consistent of?
All right, well, this is a relay race where one player completes each movement as fast as possible. After each element is complete, the player can sprint to the start line to perform a 4-point touch, both hands, both feet, and then sprint across the finish line. Now, they can substitute at any time except after performing the final rep of any given element. Now let's talk about the elements for today. Looking ahead for this sprint relay, we've got 20 wall balls with a 20-pound wall ball up to a 10-foot high target. Following that, 15 overhead squats at 185 pounds, a 40-foot back handspring, 80-foot handstand walk across the length of the grid, 6 deck to pullovers, which is a burpee, pull over the rig, pull-up bar essentially, and then 9 burpees to a 9-foot 9 ring, and then capping things off with 7 clean and jerks at 225 pounds.
And maybe just a final few thoughts on the Grid League sort of experience as a whole. The scoring system is interesting. They can either get 0, 1 or 2 points in a race, which means it keeps things nice and tight. So even going into the final races, very often it's still anybody's game. It's all to play for. The fact that they have 2 teams at a time means it's a lot easier to follow. Even though they are pretty big teams, it's not like watching a team event at a CrossFit event where you're going to have multiple teams and you're trying to follow and track people across the field. You've got 2 teams. It's pretty clear to see who's in the lead. So I could probably go on with more things, but I think at this point it's pretty clear that I'm a fan. I enjoyed it. It was fun. The athletes are incredible, and I like that we are kept well informed throughout the events. Probably my biggest criticism of Florida Grid League was the word Florida. It just felt limiting to me. It's limiting your demographic. It felt like it was maybe limiting the growth of the sport. So imagine my surprise/joy when I get an email telling me that Florida Grid League is going away. And in its place, we will have the United Grid League. That's right, Grid League is expanding in 2024. Now, they actually put out a really interesting post on their Instagram explaining some of the data with regards to the followers on social media, the views on YouTube, obviously where they live stream the matches, and maybe one of the most interesting / important pieces of data was with regards to where those views were coming from and how the majority of them were, of course, outside of Florida. And I mean, it's not hard to imagine that's the case. I'm here in the UK, and yet I was on every single live stream last year. So what is happening right now? Well, existing teams are holding tryouts. They're recruiting new players for the 2024 season. But at the same time, it looks like Grid is actually recruiting new teams. They are looking for cities that want to put up a team. I don't know how many new teams are going to be included in the 2024 season or exactly what the structure of the season is going to look like. If I find out, I'll be sure to let you know. But I have heard that they are making plans for the first events that they'll be holding outside of Florida, and I've heard talk of a potential event taking place in Las Vegas. And of course, I will be here to cover anything I learn about Grid during the 2024 season. Because, as I said, it's a lot of fun. It does not step on the toes of CrossFit. You can enjoy both, the same way you can enjoy CrossFit and football or basketball or whatever other sport you like. So in 2023, I watched Grid League as an experiment. But in 2024, I'll be watching it as a fan.